Good morning. My name is Jade Romero, and this is my son. Kai Romero, and I'm going to be doing my lesson plan with him, so I can kind of get a good idea of how well it works. He is a little bit young; he's 5, so it's not the grade level that it's intended for, but I've made some changes, and this is just to get an idea of how it's going to work. So this lesson title is Character Contributions. It's my first of 4 lesson plans, so we'll go through and kind of work through it. So today, so this lesson plan, Character Contributions, this is so the students can learn to pick 2 characters, and then they're going to compare them and decide what they contributed to the story. So it's a little bit like a compare and contrast, but there's not so much contrasting, there's just comparing. And then in this lesson plan, each student will decide. I'm going to need you to stop.
Okay.
In this lesson plan, each student is going to pick a book, and they will read the book, and then they will come up with some sort of construction paper or paper where they will present their assignment or their assessment. This is a performance-based assessment for this, through discussion and through personal work. So here is just kind of an outline. So at the top you can see the book choice. This is Curious George's First Day of School. And over here, this is going to be the vocabulary that I went through and thought would be kind of hard, especially for my son, but for other students as well. This will be the first step. They will come up with vocabulary that they need definitions for, and we will go over that before they get into this so that they have the content down. And then this, you can see the title right here, contributing, character contributing, and then it has my comparison. So this is George, which is one character, and then this is Mr. Apple, which is another character. So this is what we're going to be going over today for this lesson plan. So a few vocabulary words that we're going to assess and talk about before, we're going to start that now. Okay, come on. You don't need that right now. Okay, so Kai, do you know what the word curious means?
Curious George?
Yes, Curious George, but what does it mean to be curious?
Crazy?
Not crazy. So curious is when you wonder about something. You think, I wonder what's behind that book, or I wonder what's behind that door, or I'm curious if something tastes good. So it's the feeling of wondering. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next word, introduced. Do you know that word? Introduced? I introduced myself to you. What does that mean?
Look around?
Not necessarily. So introduced means that this is an introduction. Hi, I'm Jade.
Hi.
Then
Hi.
what do you say?
Hi, my name's Kai.
Yeah, so that's called an introduction. So when we're introducing someone, it's saying, this is my friend Kai. That's called an introduction. So that means to be introduced. So I introduced you.
Okay.
Okay, what does well-balanced mean? You don't know? So well-balanced means, so if you have broccoli and a corn dog. Hey, sit up here. That's a well-balanced meal. You have a a vegetable, and then you have something that's not super good for you. If you had a corn dog and Cheetos and a Pops, that's not called well-balanced because it's all stuff that's not good for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. What does it mean? What is a janitor?
I don't know.
Can you please sit up here? Please sit up and be a good boy. A janitor is somebody who cleans. So like usually a school has a janitor, someone who cleans and takes care of things and fixes things. So there's a janitor in this story. And then the last word we're going to review is frowned. Do you know what a frown is? Kind of what you just did. A frown is someone who's sad. It's the face they make when they're not happy. They feel sad or they feel disappointed. That's mad. That's not a frown. All right, so after the vocab review, then the students would individually read their books, but I'm going to read the book to him since he's not old enough to read yet. All right, Curious George, First Day of School by Margaret and H.A. Rays. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. Today, George was so excited he could barely eat his breakfast. You have a big day ahead of you, George, said his friend, the man with the yellow hat. It was a big day for George. It was the first day of school, and he had been invited to be a special helper. George and his friend walked together to the schoolyard. Some of the children were nervous, but George could not wait for the fun to begin. In the classroom, George's friend introduced him to Mr. Apple. Okay, so we have George, which is our first character, and now we have Mr. Apple, which is our second character. So start remembering what Mr. Apple and George are doing throughout the story, okay? Thank you for inviting George to school today, the man with the yellow hat said to the teacher. Then he waved goodbye. Have a good day, George. I'll be back to pick you up after school.
After school is done. I didn't see it.
The children were excited to have a monkey in the class. George is going to be our special helper, Mr. Apple said. And what a helper he was. At story time, George held the book. At math time, the children could count on George.
1, 2, 3, 4. Hi.
And at recess, George made sure everyone had a ball and a well-balanced snack. There's that word, well-balanced snack.
Like I'm hungry.
After lunch, Mr. Apple got out paints and brushes. George saw red, yellow, and blue paint. 3 colors were not very many. Bless you. George was curious. There's that word, curious. Could he help me make more colors?
Ugh.
First, George mixed blue and red to make purple. Next, George mixed red and yellow to make orange. Then, George mixed yellow and blue to make green. Finally, George mixed all the colors to make
Rainbow.
What do you think all the colors together are going to be?
Rainbow.
Rainbow. I think they're going to be brown. Oops. A big mess. Oh, they don't tell us. It just says a big mess. Probably a rainbow. The children thought the mess was funny, but Mr. Apple did not. Oh dear, he said. We are going to need something to clean this up. Everyone, please sit quietly while I look. George did not mean to make a mess, and he certainly did not want to sit quietly. He wanted to help. It was his job, after all. George had an idea. In the hallway, George found a closet. In the closet, he found a bucket. In the bucket, he found just what he needed. What do you think he needed?
Swiping.
A what?
Swiping.
A mop. George was on his way to the classroom when he heard someone yelling, "Stop, stop, what are you doing with my mop?" The janitor ran after George. "Stop, stop, no running in the halls," the principal ran after the janitor. But George was just going too fast to stop. He grabbed the door handle and swung inside and...
Crash!
You think it's a crash? Slosh. The bucket tipped, the mop dropped, and George slid across the floor. Now the mess was even bigger. Mr. Apple looked surprised. The principal frowned. The janitor just shook his head. And George, poor George, he felt terrible. Maybe he was not such a good helper after all.
Like choices.
Do you see her frown? Do you see her face?
Why is she mad?
Because she's upset at the mess. The children felt terrible too. They did not like to see George feeling so sad. They thought he was a great helper. Now they wanted to help him. So the children all lent a hand and some feet.
I'm disappearing. I am not real. Not real.
And before anyone knew it, the mess was gone. That little monkey sure is helpful, the janitor said. It looks like Mr. Apple has a whole class full of helpers, the principal added. At the end of the day, when George's friends arrived to pick him up, Mr. Apple said, "Thank you for all your help, George. We hope you will come help us again." The children cheered. They hoped George would come back too. George waved goodbye to his new friends. What a great day it had been. He could not wait to come back to school. All right, that's the end of the book. So then after the students have read their books, they would be asked to start in on their assessment, their project, which is what I have already put together here. So just to give you a little idea of what the project would look like or entail, I have a list of George and what he did throughout the story, kind of in comparison to Mr. Apple and what he did throughout the story. So I have that George was a monkey, right? He was a helper. He makes kids happy, mixes paint colors, makes a mess, wants to clean up the mess, goes exploring, finds a mop, steals from the janitor, makes his wrongs right by cleaning up. Then Mr. Apple, on the other hand, he is a man. He is a teacher. He shows the students how to paint. He gets upset about the mess. He is surprised at George and his behavior. And then, after everything is resolved, he ends up inviting George back to visit anytime. So this is like a comprehensive assessment, just to see like baseline how the students can compare to characters. It also lets them go through and kind of reassess what they read and the story. The vocabulary part helps them learn new vocabulary and get the right definitions instead of just skipping over the word and not reading it. So this is the lesson plan for character contribution. It meets the standard of it's the CCSS Literacy 3.3 standard. Describe characters in a story, their traits, motivations, or feelings, and explain how their actions contributed to the sequence of events, which is exactly what we just did with the character contribution. So it meets that standard. If the students can complete this assessment, then they will pass that standard and the lesson plan will be a success. If the students have trouble with this, or we have students that are not passing it, I will reassess and either reteach the whole class or reteach just those few students so that they can master that standard. I think that's all I have for you folks today. Thank you, Kai, for being in our video. Can you say goodbye?
Goodbye, I disappeared.
Thank you for watching.